Hey everybody, it's Nate and Steph from Adventure in a Backpack.
These last couple of weeks have been rough for the van life community. We've had, just within the last couple of weeks, we've broken down twice. Eamon and Beck, they are having to replace their entire engine in their van. The Nomad movement, their wheels fell off.
Off. O-F-T, oft.
Let's see. Sam Van Zam, she just had to limp her Sprinter into the shop for a DEF issue. And the list goes on and on and on. So we kind of wanted to talk today about how we deal with breakdowns. And it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. When you're driving around in your house is going to break down. And as sad as that sounds and as sucky as it feels when it does happen, it's going to happen, and it's better to be prepared for it and kind of have some systems in place for when it does happen than to just be stranded on the side of the road not knowing what to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also one of those things, like, I know that, and I want to say this early in the video because I know that we're going to get people that's like, well, it's like Sprinters break down. It's like, well, guys, listen, the market determines what a good vehicle is versus a bad vehicle. And if nobody was buying Sprinters anymore because they were breaking down all the time, they wouldn't be sold. So the fact that they're still being sold, the fact that UPS still buys thousands of them every year to be their workhorses for delivery means that basically people are just being whiny about Sprinters. So
yeah.
Stop
and not
it.
to mention, like, our van is 12 years old. Eamon and Beck's was 11 years old. I have no idea how old the schoolie from Nomadic Movement, how old theirs was, but it's old. I mean, We're not talking brand new vans here. These guys aren't under warranty. They've had rough lives. So, let's take it easy.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. Every vehicle has problems, but this video is about how we deal with those problems, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's talk about kind of our history, actually, and kind of how we got to where we are and are comfortable with working on our own vehicles. I know you guys comment on it all the time that I'm always getting in there and helping out with the repairs and everything. And so we kind of wanted to address that and talk about our backgrounds on repairing vehicles and working on vehicles and stuff. Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I was basically raised in the middle of the country. So pretty much just doing any kind of building projects. I know how to weld, built houses from the ground up, minus bricking. You don't want me doing brickwork.
I've seen your brickwork.
Yeah, brickwork is pretty awful. But everything like that, plumbing, electrical, framing, everything like that was commonplace for me growing up. Didn't get huge into automotive mechanics, change oil, could change fuel filters, fuel pumps, spark plugs, wires, coils, distributors, caps. I could do some basic mechanic work, but not yeah. And that's the thing is I hate to sandbag it, because I do know enough about mechanic work to more than get by. I mean, I'm not hooking it up to a star machine to read all the specifics of this particular engine, but hook it up to an OBD2 scanner and pretty much good to go. But it's been one of those things, I've always been super mechanically inclined for the most part. And so that is kind of where we're at. And that's not to say that we're miles and miles in front of everybody else as far as that goes. I know that we have some people who are mechanics that who are actual mechanics, real licensed mechanics and stuff like that, who watch our videos. And we're not there, but we're definitely way ahead of the curve. And I think a lot of people think that it's unattainable, I think. the fact that we already know a lot of this stuff, but it's really not. The best time to learn how an engine works and how to be like practice getting mechanically inclined was 20 years ago, and the second best time is right now. So that being said, what do you know?
Well, so I kind of had a similar, actually very different background, but I similar to Nate, I grew up learning all of this stuff. My parents were divorced and I lived with my mom. My mom was an aircraft mechanic, so definitely not to say, like, I definitely had some mechanical training, and I had access to any tool under the sun because of that. And I was always the type that I just enjoyed tinkering with things. I enjoyed learning how things worked, taking it apart, putting it back together, fixing things, that kind of thing. And so anytime, like I said, my parents were divorced, and so anytime something broke in the house, I was always the one to jump in with my mom and say, teach me how to fix this. Like, I realize you're going to fix it, but I want to know so in the future I can fix it. And so I learned how to do plumbing from that. I learned electrical work from that. I learned how to work on vehicles. I learned how to change my tires. My older sister, I have two older sisters. One of my older sisters, the first time she got a flat tire, she called me to help her out because she didn't know how to change it. I was always the one diving in and learning all of this stuff. And so I had a really great opportunity as a child to learn all of that stuff, my mom being a mechanic. And so actually in terms of like vehicle mechanics, what happened was when I turned 16, I had a hand-me-down truck that barely ran. It was my mom's old truck. It was a 94 Dodge Ram.
This was in 2005.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
the
2005.
truck was 11 years old at that point.
At that point, yeah. And my mom took horrible care of it. My sister drove it for a while. She took even worse care of it. And it barely ran by the time it got to me. But it was a free vehicle, and I could not afford to buy a vehicle. I had about $2,000 to work with that I had saved up. And so my choices were fix the truck that I had for free or go and buy a beater car and hope that it ran for long enough for me to work and save up for another car. And so, like, for me, the choice was obvious. I was going to fix that truck because, again, that just goes back to like my personality of just wanting to figure it out, tinker with it, and learn how everything works. I also had a really awesome opportunity that I had a family friend who was a mechanic. He worked with my mom as an aircraft mechanic, but he was also a car mechanic as well. And he offered to teach me how to like actually guide me along in rebuilding my engine in my truck, and allow me to use his garage. So I jumped all over that, and at 16 years old, I was pulling the engine out of my pickup and rebuilding it. Nate and I were dating at the time, and so rather than, when we were 16, rather than going on dinner and a movie dates, we would meet after school and work on my engine. So that's how we really started. That's how the majority of our like mechanical training in vehicles happened.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, I mean, you're seeing the pictures rolling across screen right now that I'm overlaying, but like, we tore it down to the block, to the pistons, to the rods, everything got replaced, everything got inspected, cylinders got honed out. I mean, everything there was to do. It was a big project. How long did that take? We were talking.
I don't even remember.
We were talking the other day.
Months.
Yeah, it was a few month-long project, and
granted, we were in school still. We were still in high school at that point.
Yeah, well, I remember it was during football season, so it was like we'd go to school, band practice, football games on Friday. But yeah, we were trying to keep up with school. That was hard for me, but.
Yeah, Saturdays and Sundays, that's what we were doing. We weren't going out and partying with our friends. We were rebuilding my engine,
scrubbing on cylinders and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it was a really great experience, a really great opportunity for both of us to learn a lot about vehicles, learn all of the different components and how everything works. Again, though, that was a 94 Dodge Ram, so things have changed a lot since then. I mean, that thing didn't have the computers that this does.
I think
and
yours was fuel injected, and that was about the only computerized thing that was really on it.
Yeah.
Not near as sophisticated as what's going on now. But the thing is so I think it's time to like jump in like how we troubleshoot an idea or troubleshoot a problem. So let's go ahead and get into that.
So you're driving down the road and the dreaded check engine light comes on.
Dun, dun, dun. Oh no, there's a check engine light. Okay, so let's just talk through like kind of our mindset of like what we would do in this situation. And so rather than like freaking out and getting on Facebook and immediately like while I'm driving and trying to manage the road and like my check engine light just came on, what do I do? Or what's wrong with my engine? I'm going to get to a safe space to pull off. I can't believe how many people, so back when I was a firefighter, I can't believe how many people would pull off the side of the road and get hit on the side of the road while they were just having car issues. Like if your check engine light comes on and it's still drivable, get to a parking lot, guys. Like just go to a parking lot. You know, if your engine is in such bad shape that it is going to cause harm to the engine to drive it further, it's just going to shut off. Like that's the reality of it. So get to a safe place, and then we're going to start checking things out.
While you're on your way to your safe parking spot, you want to start listening for symptoms. So turn off your music, turn off your podcast, whatever you're listening to, whatever noises you have going on. Turn off all of that and start listening to your engine and see if you can hear anything that is out of the ordinary. Make sure you can hear your turbo. Your turbo should be kind of a high-pitched whistle. See if you can hear that. Is that turbo engaged? Are there any weird noises coming from the engine? Any clicking? Any misfiring? Is there smoke coming out of the engine or out of the exhaust? Look for those symptoms and just check for anything out of the ordinary. Now, that being said, in order to do that, you need to know what your engine sounds like ordinarily. So if you don't know what your engine sounds like, if you don't know what your turbo sounds like, next time you're driving, turn off all of your music and listen to it and start getting a feel for what your engine should sound like on a normal basis before that check engine light ever comes on.
So once we get to the parking lot, the first thing that I really like to do is I like to pull codes before I do anything. You know, obviously if the engine is smoking, that's going to give a pretty good indicator of like where the problem is. But I like pulling codes before I get out and look if there's no obvious signs of something wrong, because the codes can give a little bit of direction on like where to look. So we're going to get the code scanner hooked up.
Now, in order to pull the codes, you're going to have a code scanner. I highly recommend having a vehicle-specific code scanner rather than a generic code scanner because they do give you a lot more specific codes and diagnostics on the vehicle. They are a little bit more expensive, but in my opinion, they're well worth the money. And 1 or 2 trips to the dealership to pull codes would more than pay for the code scanner. So it's always good to have that code scanner. So the one that we have is an iCarSoft. We'll link to the specific one in the description below. So now I'm just going to show you how easy it is to pull these codes and run the diagnostics. So we have the code scanner plugged in right now, and I'm just going to have Nate turn the ignition to the accessory, or to the on position, not the accessory. There we go. And so we're going to choose diagnose. We're going to choose the Sprinter. Sprinter. (906).
And you don't have to know what all of that means. The 906 is basically just our engine, in particular engine model, but that's just one of those things that you look at your own engine and see.
Good point. Diesel engine. And we're going to select the automatic diagnose mode. So it just takes a few minutes to run those diagnostics through. Your vehicle's going to make a few weird noises as it's running through those diagnostics. And we're about done. Okay, so this screen gives you all of the different categories of diagnostic codes. So you can go through here and select each one and read the fault memory. Okay, so we have no codes on that. And you can go through and do that with every single one. So if it's a check engine light though, you're going to start down here with the engine. So we have a 6-cylinder, or you can choose the 4-cylinder if that's what yours is. Ours is a 6-cylinder. And read the fault memory. We have no codes currently. We don't have a check engine light on or anything like that. So it's coming up with no DTCs. Okay, so I'm gonna go back. Now the really cool thing about this, this particular code scanner also is if you are having issues with something, you can read the actual values of the codes, or of your, what am I trying to say? The actual values of the engine components as you're driving. So like you can check your boost pressure as you're driving. We're not driving right now, so it's not going to show anything. It shows 0 on everything right now. But as you're driving, if you are having issues with that, we use this a lot when we were trying to figure out our turbo issue back a few months ago. So this is a really great, really great tool to have for when you're having those kinds of issues. If you do have a code, another great thing about this code scanner, and again why I recommend having a vehicle-specific code scanner, is it's actually going to give you pretty specific information about the code. So let's just show one that we actually do have pulling here. So I'm going to read the fault memory. And this is for our license plate. So take off my glove. So right here is the actual code itself, 901C. So you can Google that code. But also it gives you a little bit of a description about it. So it says license plate lights, open circuit and wiring, or side marker lamps, open circuit and wiring. So basically what that means is our license plate light is out. And for ours, it's actually that code is always on there because we have we replaced the light with an LED light, and it doesn't pull enough amps from that light to actually register in the instrument panel that it's there. So it always says it's out. It's not though. So that's an example of one code, and you can take that code number and Google it and figure out what your problem is. Oh, that was like. What are you doing?
Okay, so as soon as you get out, just look for things that is like blatantly obvious. Like I like to check underneath, like, is there anything that's pouring out, pouring out of the back, pouring out of the front, because you have liquids in the rear differential, transmissions back there, you could have something pouring out of that. We're just looking at things that are just blatantly obvious. Like, do you have a big puddle of antifreeze underneath the engine? Do you have a bunch of oil spilling out? Is there fuel leaking out? Anything like that. So make a full 360 around the van and check for anything that looks blatantly obvious. If you don't see anything, or even if you do, it's time to go ahead and open up the hood. So if you're not very mechanically inclined, like opening up the hood, or looking at all of the stuff underneath the hood, may be a little intimidating. There's a lot of stuff under there. But what you can do is, like I was saying earlier, look for things that are blatantly obvious. You can open up the hood, start looking around. Oh, hey, look, what's this? This doesn't look right. Even to the untrained eye, I would think that it's like, well, this one's plugged into this one. This one's all hanging off loose right here. That would probably cause an error code. We got a little connector there loose. So we're just gonna plug it back in, just like that. So now that you've plugged that back in, go inside, clear your codes, and hopefully you should be good to go. Now that's obviously like I just pulled that off, making kind of a pretty obvious case, but sometimes it is as obvious as that. But also, like, if you're trying to get down in there, I mean, really get down in there and look, see if you can see anything like melted. You know, it doesn't take much to start looking down in here and see if anything is melted. This whole thing comes off really quickly. I'm actually going to take it off because it does come apart so quickly. So just like that, that comes off. This comes down. This is supposed to be screwed down, but these screws are all stripped out and have been like that since we got it. So that comes off there, nice and easy. And then you have a lot of access to everything under there. So what you can see now is I can see that there's a little bit of liquid right here. So there's going to be some kind of leaking right in there. I don't even know what that is. So what you're going to do is you're going to go Google. You're going to use the Google machine and you're going to look up pictures of the engine. You can find pictures that have diagrams. All these parts are labeled, and it really just takes a little bit of Googling to find out what this is. If you can't find out what it is, take a picture with your phone and then circle whatever it is that you think the problem is if you're seeing something that's blatantly wrong, and then put it on those Facebook groups that we were talking about earlier. If you're going to ask people for help on Facebook groups, please, please, please come to the group with some information. Like, don't just ask, hey, my van isn't working. What's wrong with it? Like, there could be 100,000 different things that could be wrong with it. So do your best to at least pull it apart this far and kind of be able to see. Now, if you can't see anything, I understand that. Like, sometimes you won't be able to see that. But at least go this far to make a really good judgment call on what there is that could possibly be wrong.
So like Nate said, after you've done all of that, definitely get in and utilize those resources, utilize Facebook groups and internet forums. You know, for sprinters specifically, Sprinter Source is a really great resource, and I highly recommend you using that. But coming to that with some information really helps people to be able to help you diagnose your issue. Now, if you've gotten that far and you still have no idea, or you have figured out what your general issue is, definitely know your limitations as well, and know what things you can fix yourself. You know, if it's a matter of plugging back in a sensor, that's pretty easy. But if it's a matter of, you know, replacing some different parts that you're not familiar with, know your own limitations and when to take it into a professional mechanic. And with that also, with all of these steps you've gone through, you now have a little bit more knowledge. You're a little bit more educated, so that you can't be taken advantage of. You know, you don't want people to be telling you your torque converter's running low on torque, but
and
your water pump's nearly down a quart.
And your injector ports are stripped, and that
ain't all.
Okay.
Okay, that's enough
on.
of that. But I've lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I know. This video had been way too serious up to this point, so I thought I had to throw that in there.
Yeah.
Throw some Alan Jackson at it.
Yeah. But honestly, and like completely serious, being able to walk into a mechanic with at least some knowledge really helps to not be taken advantage of, not be just completely thrown for a loop. And it really helps to know when not all mechanics actually know what they're talking about. So I've seen it time and time and time again that people take it to a mechanic and the mechanic actually has no idea what they're talking about and just start replacing parts. And that's not a very good approach.
If you have an idea of what's going on in your vehicle, and then you, like, I'm a big fan of calling mechanics before I ever go there, because then I can call them and I can talk through what my problem is, and based on their responses, I can tell if they're full of crap or not, basically. If all of the stuff that they're talking about doesn't line up with anything that I'm talking about, I have a really bad feeling about the whole situation. I'm probably going to call somebody else. Or I can get back on the forums, back on the groups, say, hey, this mechanic is saying this. Does that sound anywhere close to accurate or not so much? So, we have anything else to talk about?
I don't think so. I think that pretty much covered it. I
Yeah.
really, really hope this was helpful to you guys, and helpful to really start thinking about these issues. Because, like we said at the beginning of this video, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen; it's a matter of when it's going to happen.
Exactly. So, until next time, we'll see you guys later.
Bye.